The thing is that when you are a director, you need to be involved in a lot of different fields. You must be a psychologist, an architecture expert, you must be a choreographer. If the coach is good, I don't think a psychologist is needed. The reason I'm not a neurobiologist but a cognitive psychologist is that I think looking at brain tissue is often the wrong level of analysis. You have to look at a higher level of organization. I have a brother who's a psychologist. He says 3/4 of the world are born feeling that they will be affected by the world, 1/4 are born knowing that they will affect the world. I like to read psychologists' books. The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, that's one of my favorites. Those kinds of books. I'm a psychologist. I was a psychology faculty member, and then I became an administrator of the department, then the dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. At the time of the presidential search, I was the dean. My plan A was to be a psychologist. I thought I would be a receptionist. I'm always middle of the road and very normal. I've always wanted a normal life, and this is what I got. The way that people feel changes everything. Feelings are forces. They cause us to time travel, and to leave ourselves, to leave our bodies. I would be that kind of psychologist who says, "You're absolutely right, there are monsters under the bed." I'm not much of an analyzer or a psychologist. When I was in first grade, some psychologist told my mom if I didn't go to graduate school, she basically failed as a parent, because I had the aptitude to do it, which is so dumb. Huge pressure. I've never, ever had any therapy. Some might say I need it, but I've never seen a shrink or a psychologist or anything like that. I've always considered myself more of a mathematician than a psychologist. But Racine's extraordinary powers as a writer become still more obvious when we consider that besides being a great poet he is also a great psychologist. I think I'm becoming a psychologist in explaining the Republican Party. It's the only way you can explain them. It's psychological. My early research, I'm a social psychologist, and my early research was on how people make moral judgments. When I entered the field in 1987, everybody was looking at moral reasoning. How do kids reason about a moral dilemma? Should a guy steal a drug to save his wife's life? My unconscious knows more about the consciousness of the psychologist than his consciousness knows about my unconscious. I always wanted to be a writer, but I wanted to do other things, too, be a psychologist, a librarian, etc. Now I've decided that reading fiction that features characters who are in those professions will do. Though as a psychologist I like to think that nothing human is foreign to me, I admit to having been repeatedly flabbergasted by the insouciance, and sometimes relish, with which our ancestors carried out and witnessed unspeakable cruelties. I'm good at reading people. If I wasn't an actor, I would be a psychologist. As an undergraduate at Harvard in the 1960s, I was fascinated by my visits to psychologist B.F. Skinner's laboratory. My mother's a psychologist, my stepfather's a psychologist, my stepmother is a therapist and my dad's a lawyer, so it was all prominent in my life. I don't know anyone who doesn't know someone on some form of prescription medicine. One of the perks of being a psychologist is access to tools that allow you to carry out the injunction to know thyself. I don't remember a time when I wasn't acting. I have taken time off to figure out if it's what I really want to do, and it is. The only other job I'd want is to be a psychologist, as I spend most of my time analyzing people and emotions. There's steps that I've taken already, and each week, talking with the sports psychologist on a routine basis and working with the different programs that we're going through. This is all stuff that you can say you're going to make a difference, but I'm putting it into action. I thought psychologists were people who rob, figuratively of course, money from the insecure, but they are not. They are people who are there to help you. And if you find a good psychologist, they will allow you to talk about everything and open up, without the slightest of fears, and that is no easy thing. I never went to a psychologist or psychiatrist in my life. Never. You know, Italians are a little prejudiced against that kind of thing. If I had not become an actress, I would be a journalist or a psychologist. I like to analyze the mind and be involved in political moments that change history. A certain degree of neurosis is of inestimable value as a drive, especially to a psychologist. It used to be that whenever I introduced myself to people and told them I was a psychologist, they would shrink away from me. Because, quite rightly, the impression the American public has of psychologists is, you want to know what's wrong with me. The psychologist was a real positive and I benefited strongly from using him. Being a developmental psychologist didn't make me any better at dealing with my own children, no. I muddled through, and, believe me, fretted and worried with the best of them. As a person who has spent my career as a child psychologist and have dealt with many children who have struggled with many problems in families, I have seen families ripped apart by so many things that sometimes law has tried to deal with. It might sound glib, but in a sense, as an actor I'm a journalist and a psychologist recording life and truth. I am neither a sociologist nor a psychologist, but you don't have to be one to see that Turkey is in a vortex of problems, isolated from the world. I was going to be a doctor, but I think my music allowed me to help more people than I could have done one-on-one as a psychologist, just like other people's music really helped me. Being a psychologist did enable me to maintain objectivity. My early childhood prepared me to be a social psychologist. I grew up in a South Bronx ghetto in a very poor family. From Sicilian origin, I was the first person in my family to complete high school, let alone go to college. We coaches have to learn how to deal with that. How do I get to each one best? With a talk, with video analysis. And what sort of tone? We need our own coaches for that. The sports psychologist coaches me too. My mom's a psychologist, and I think that has influenced me on a personal level. Plus, I'm just generally interested in visualization and humanity, social activity and technology, and what happens in aggregate. I was a loner as a child and happiest at home, launching toy rockets and aeroplanes. When I started causing trouble in my third year at grammar school, Mum was really surprised. My parents sent me to a child psychologist, who suggested I might have Asperger's syndrome. As a man, it is true that I will never know what it is like to be a woman. As an organizational psychologist, though, I feel a responsibility to bring evidence to bear on dynamics of work life that affect all of us, not only half of us. My father is a psychologist who wouldn't let fear stop us. Particularly with me, he was hell-bent on requiring us and teaching us to walk through fear. I don't know if I would have become someone who taps into their ability to push through those tough situations without him. A poet must be a psychologist, but a secret one. He should know and feel the roots of phenomena but present only the phenomena themselves in full bloom or as they fade away. As a psychologist, I can tell you that there are people who look very good in a group, but they're very different in a one-on-one situation. I will continue going to the psychologist. It helps me to manage the pressure and emotions. I was raised by a single psychologist mother and we spent every evening sitting at the kitchen table and dissecting our emotions and speculating about the inner life of everyone we knew. I'm sure a psychologist would see something highly significant in how absent-minded I am. I mean, I'd forget my head if it wasn't attached to my neck by muscles, ligaments, and my esophagus. I spent a lot of time in the school psychologist's office. I didn't apply myself. My mother thought I had learning disabilities. Westerners often laud their children as talented or gifted, while Asian parents highlight the importance of hard work. And in fact, research performed by Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck has found that the way parents offer approval affects the way children perform, even the way they feel about themselves. When a player hears the word psychologist at the first, you are taken aback, but I realized that I needed help. Visit our website for more quotes, quoting.com.